You didn't come here by accident. Something deep inside you pulled you to this moment, to this story, a story that isn't just about boxing, but about life, resilience, and the kind of legacy that never fades. Because today, the world says goodbye to a giant. Not just a fighter, not just a champion, but a man whose name carried weight far beyond the ropes of any ring. George Foreman is gone, and somehow the world feels a little different now. Quieter. Like a force that once shook the ground with every step has finally come to rest. He wasn't just a boxer, he was a symbol of power, of redemption, of transformation. A man who fought not just with his fists, but with his heart, his soul, and an unbreakable will that made him more than just a champion. It made him unforgettable. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture him in his prime, towering, powerful, a presence that made opponents feel like they were standing in the shadow of a mountain. When he stepped into the ring, it wasn't just a fight. It was a storm rolling in, inevitable, unstoppable. His punches weren't just thrown, they were delivered like thunder, shaking the very foundations of the sport. But even the strongest storms must one day settle. And today, George Foreman rests. He lived 76 years, but those years weren't just lived, they were battled for, earned, and carved into the history of boxing like an unshakable monument. From the streets of Marshall, Texas, to the Olympic podium, from the crushing defeat of Joe Frazier to the heartbreak of losing to Muhammad Ali, from a preacher's pulpit to a stunning return to the ring, at an age when others had long since faded, his life was a testament to the idea that a man is never truly finished until he decides he is. Think about that. At 45, when the world had written him off, when they said his time had passed, he stepped into that ring and did what no one believed possible. He became the oldest heavyweight champion in history, not because he was the strongest, not because he was the fastest, but because he refused to let anyone else decide when his story would end. And that's why this moment feels so heavy. Because now, for the first time, George Foreman is no longer fighting. His family, in their grief, shared words that cut deep. "Our hearts are broken," they said. And how could they not be? He was more than just a father, more than just a husband, more than just a preacher or a businessman or a boxer. He was a protector, a warrior, a man who stood for something greater than himself. And as the tributes pour in from legends, from fighters, from those who once stood in awe of his power, we realize that this isn't just a farewell. It's a moment of reflection, a moment to remember what he taught us. Because Foreman's story was never just about how hard he could hit. It was about how many times he could rise. This is just the first part of his story. Stay with me, because by the time we reach the end, you'll see why his name will never be forgotten. His story wasn't supposed to end like this. Not now. Not ever. Because men like George Foreman, giants, warriors, legends aren't meant to fade away. They are supposed to stand forever, their presence so strong that even time itself hesitates to touch them. But here we are, facing the unthinkable. The world woke up to the news that George Foreman had taken his final breath, and for a moment, it felt like the air had been knocked out of us. How could the man who had once seemed invincible, who had walked through fire and come out the other side, simply be gone? It doesn't feel real. And maybe that's because, in so many ways, he will never truly be gone. Close your eyes and listen. Do you hear it? The echoes of his legacy? The sound of gloves pounding against heavy bags, the roar of the crowd as he stepped into the ring, the weight of history shifting every time he landed one of those monstrous punches. His story isn't just a part of boxing, it is boxing. It's written in sweat, in blood, in every young fighter who dreams of defying the odds. And it all started in the most unlikely of places. Marshall, Texas. 1949. A young boy born into poverty, raised in a world that didn't make things easy for kids like him. He wasn't just fighting opponents in the ring, he was fighting life itself. He dropped out of school, found himself on the streets, making choices that could have led him down a path of no return. But then something changed. A spark. A second chance. Boxing saved George Foreman. Or maybe George Foreman saved boxing. At just 19 years old, he stepped onto the Olympic stage in Mexico City, a raw, unpolished powerhouse. The world wasn't ready for what they saw. He didn't just win gold, he dominated. And as he stood there, victorious, the American flag draped around his shoulders, the world caught its first real glimpse of the storm that was coming. He turned pro, and it was like watching a wrecking ball tear through everything in its path. 37 straight wins. Knockout after knockout. And then, in 1973, came the moment that shook the world. Joe Frazier. Undefeated. Unstoppable. Until he met Foreman. That fight, if you can even call it that, was pure destruction. Frazier, a man who had gone to war with Muhammad Ali, a man who had never been knocked down in his entire career, hit the canvas 6 times in 2 rounds. 6 times. The boxing world didn't just take notice, they trembled. And then came that fight. Kinshasa, Zaire. 1974. The rumble in the jungle. Foreman wasn't just the favorite, he was a force of nature. Stronger, younger, more powerful than Ali. Every expert, every analyst, every fighter watching expected one thing: devastation. They thought Foreman would bulldoze Ali, break him down, leave him shattered in that ring. But Ali had other plans. You know the story. The rope-a-dope. The strategy no one saw coming. Foreman swung and swung and swung hundreds of punches, each one meant to end the fight, each one taking just a little more out of him. Until, in the 8th round, Ali struck back. A combination. A flash of movement. And just like that, the giant fell. It should have been the end. For a long time, it was the end. Foreman walked away from boxing, turned to faith, became a preacher. He found a new purpose, a new fight, one that didn't take place under bright lights or inside a ring. He built a church, spoke to the lost, lifted up those who had nothing. But the fire never truly went out. In 1987, at 38 years old, an age when most fighters had long since retired, he made the unthinkable decision to return. They laughed. They said he was too old, too slow, too out of shape. But George Foreman didn't listen to doubters. He listened to the fire inside him. For 7 years, he fought. He took on younger, faster men, proving time and time again that power like his doesn't fade with age. And then, in 1994, came the moment no one saw coming. Michael Moorer, a new champion, an undefeated fighter in his prime. A man who had no reason to fear a 45-year-old relic from the past. And for 9 rounds, it looked like Foreman's doubters had been right. He was losing. Behind on the scorecards, the dreams slipping away. And then, like a ghost from another era, he unleashed one final shot. A single right hand. Moorer crumbled. The referee counted. And at 45 years old, George Foreman became the heavyweight champion of the world again. It wasn't just a victory, it was history being rewritten. The oldest heavyweight champion of all time, a feat that may never be repeated. And yet, for everything he achieved in boxing, some will say his greatest success came after he left the ring for good. Because that's when George Foreman became a household name for something entirely different. The George Foreman Grill. It sounds almost ridiculous, doesn't it? That a man who once threw punches like a wrecking ball made more money selling kitchen appliances than he ever did fighting in the ring. But it's true. The grill, with its simple, healthy design, became a phenomenon. Millions sold. Hundreds of millions earned. He was asked once if it was true that he made over $200 million from it. His response? Much more. That was George. He was larger than life in every way. A man who took his second chances and turned them into something greater than anyone imagined. And now, he's gone. The tributes poured in: Mike Tyson, Magic Johnson, Jake Paul, Bob Arum, even the grandson of Muhammad Ali. They all recognized the truth. George Foreman wasn't just a boxer. He was a symbol of something bigger. Resilience. Redemption. Power not just in his fists, but in his spirit. So how do we say goodbye to a man like this? Maybe we don't. Maybe we simply keep telling his story. Keep remembering those moments when he shocked the world. Keep feeling the inspiration that his life gave us. Because George Foreman may be gone, but legends like him, they never truly leave us.